If you or someone you know is filled with intellectual curiosity, can be alone in their head for days on end, and kind of enjoys throwing out controversial ideas from time to time, then they might be a type 5 investigator. Also, if you've tested or been told by others that you're a type 1, 3, or 9, but you're not quite sure, then this video should help confirm or change the Enneagram type that you identify as, because those 3 types, and especially 9s, are often mistyped as 5s. So with that said, here's a quick look at all the topics we'll cover in this overview of the Enneagram personality type 5. We'll start off by defining their major personality traits, then we'll go back in time a bit and cover their childhood experience, then we'll get into the variations based on their wings. Next, we'll describe their movements of integration and disintegration based on how healthy they are. Then we'll get into their instinctual variants and triadic groups. And lastly, we'll end with some practical tips to help avoid the pitfalls of their personality and maintain a healthy sense of self. I'll even pepper in some silly topics at the very end like spirit animals, spirit country, and some others, just to lighten up a bit and take a break from all the serious stuff we'll cover throughout most of the episode. So that's our roadmap. You ready? Let's get into it. The Enneagram Type 5 is called the investigator because they spend their lives in a tireless pursuit of knowledge. They love to question why things are the way that they are, and that's because these questions usually justify their lack of initiative or general avoidance of risk-taking. Another way to say it is that the world of ideas just feels safer than the physical, real world for Type 5s. And that's because the unhealthy ego message of the 5 tells them that they are helpless or incapable of surviving in this world. And so they should minimize their physical needs and maximize their mental abilities. This is also why the 5's core struggle in life is with avarice, or the hoarding of resources, be it material resources like money or immaterial resources like ideas and intellectual property. 5s can be pretty secretive and isolated because they tend to think that everyone else is also out for themselves. 5s believe that the only way they can protect themselves is to gain some specialized knowledge or skill that makes them invaluable to the world around them. This creates a kind of love-hate relationship with the mainstream world because 5s feel like any idea that the mainstream world accepts must be way too basic or shallow or is just flat out wrong, because at the end of the day, most people are kind of stupid, but you also need them to pay your bills. Now, it's not that all 5s are like arrogant, judgmental jerks. It's just that they are constantly making intellectual observations about everything and everyone around them. They notice and remember so much detail. And because they value intellectual integrity far more than social acceptance, their ideas often push against widely held beliefs. It's this commitment to the infinite world of ideas that makes 5s so innovative, and they often come up with solutions to major problems in the world that no one else has ever thought of. But it's ironic though, because 5s can come up with these grand solutions to complex problems, but they often struggle with the most basic challenges in life, like having small talk at a party, or picking out new clothes, or going grocery shopping, or going on a date. The more common the task, the more often it gets ignored or dismissed as unimportant. Overall, Type 5s are quirky, curious folks that will keep you on your toes if they actually let you into their world. So those are the personality traits for the Type 5 in general. Now let's rewind a bit and talk about the 5's formative childhood experience. Disclaimer: you should know that when I discuss Enneagram childhood experiences, I am always taking into account both nature and nurture. We are all born with a specific temperament, psychologically speaking. That is undeniable. But the way our primary caregivers raise us has a great deal of influence on how that temperament gets expressed as adults. Okay, there's my disclaimer. The Type 5's childhood is defined by feeling like they had no defined role within the family system. You could say they felt crowded out of the family because there's too many siblings, or one sibling has special needs, or the parents themselves are actually too emotionally needy or unstable, and they can't provide the Type 5 child with the kind of love and support they needed. It's at this point that the Type 5 child makes a subconscious agreement with their parental figures. Essentially, they say, "I won't ask too much from you if you don't ask too much from me." This unspoken expectation colors every relationship the Type 5 will have for the rest of their life, and it's the reason fives struggle with being relationally stingy because since childhood, they've been protective of their personal space, their time, and most certainly their emotions. As fives grow up, they usually keep their distance from both parents, which fosters a sense of apathy about the relationship in general. There may be a logical sense of importance or rational sense of love placed towards the parent's role in their life, especially when it comes to certain occasions like weddings and family get-togethers and holidays and whatnot. But internally, they fight to identify too closely with any one person, including their parents, and instead they learn to relate emotionally with ideas, theories, or belief systems. So while type 5 children are quick to engage with challenging or complex ideas, they will quickly disengage from any painful situation or relational conflict. Overall, the childhood experience for most fives creates a pattern of detachment from and objectification of people so that no relationship can ever hurt too deeply. Okay, on a much lighter note, let's talk about how type 5s differ based on their wings. And quick reminder, your wing can only be the type directly to the right or to the left of your primary type. So you can't be like a 5 wing 9 or something like that. And trust me, I hear that stuff all the time. Now, 5s with a 4 wing are called the iconoclast. I think this is one of the most badass subtype names, so kudos to the Enneagram Institute for coming up with it. If you've never heard of an iconoclast before, it's just someone who works to tear down mainstream ideas. Back in the day, it was literally people who destroyed religious art because they believed it was misleading. So that's the business of 5-wing 4s. Iconoclasts are incredibly intuitive because they mix the intellectual perceptions of the 5 with the emotional awareness of the type 4 individualist. This makes them very introspective, withdrawn people, and yet they're often still great in social situations because they have this ability to peer into the inner workings of your mind. In fact, the artistic traits of the 4 naturally aid the creative tendencies of the 5, so this subtype tends to be the most creative personality type within the Enneagram because they blend the arts and the sciences as they search for both beauty and purpose. On the downside, though, the 4-wing adds a lot of emotional turbulence to the 5, and they are far more moody, irritable, and hypersensitive than the 5-wing 6. Iconoclasts can also be a bit more self-indulgent and impractical, as they usually spend hours reading books or playing video games when there's real work to be done. Overall, 5s with a 4-wing need to allow space for lightheartedness and silliness because the melancholy of the 4 mixed with the potential nihilism of the 5 can lead to a pretty dark worldview. All right, that's the 5 with a 4-wing. Now let's move on to the 5 with a 6-wing, which is nicknamed the problem solver. Right off the bat, this subtype is way more practical, sociable, and hyper anxious than the 5-wing 4. The 6-wing is also in the thinking triad along with the 5, so they are plagued even more by the constant chatter of their mind and the suppression of their emotions. This makes problem solvers unique in 2 ways. First, they're the most purely intellectual of all the Enneagram types. Second, they are the hardest to be in relationship with of all the Enneagram types. Problem solvers couldn't be more uncomfortable with relational intimacy. In many ways, they feel robotic and would much rather spend time with data than going on a date. See what I did there? 5-wing 6s also lack self-awareness because they're so focused on observing the outside world rather than spending time being introspective and looking at their inner world. They're a bit like Sherlock Holmes, as their true gift is taking a mass of seemingly unrelated information and then coming to a brilliant connected conclusion. They're also socially awkward, witty, endearing, and oftentimes argumentative, like Sherlock Holmes. Overall, 5s with a 6-wing just have to focus a bit more on using their observations to connect with people rather than an excuse to push them away. All right, now let's move on to the Type 5's movement of integration and disintegration. Now, if you look at the shape of the Enneagram, you'll see that the 5 has lines connecting it to Type 7 enthusiasts and Type 8 challengers. So in disintegration, 5s take on the worst traits of the Type 7 enthusiasts. I feel like 7s are out there going, whoa, what bad traits do I have? I'm such a great time. Well, 7s deal with a ton of subconscious anxiety that fuels their hyperactivity. So when 5s aren't healthy, they try to numb their restless minds with tons of distraction and changing tasks every 5 seconds. They get super scattered, they can be reckless with their bodies, and they often turn to some self-destructive indulgences like drugs and alcohol to numb their increasing sense of mental despair. However, when type 5s are healthy, they integrate the best characteristics of the type 8 challenger, and they become way more confident, take charge individuals that finally act on all the information that they've gained. Average 5s always feel like they just need to learn a little bit more before they get out into the world, so healthy 5s have matured and become self-assured after they've risked their intellectual security by testing and refining their theoretical knowledge out in the real world with real people. They've also found the strength necessary to trust people and create powerful connections with supportive individuals. All right, those are the movements of integration and disintegration in a nutshell. Time to go a layer deeper and talk about how the instincts influence the type 5 personality. The 3 Enneagram instincts are the self-preservation instinct, the social instinct, and the sexual instinct. These instincts lay on top of our personality, so it's really important to know your primary instinct because everything about your Enneagram type is going to be filtered through your primary instincts. So let's start out by describing how 5s look when they operate primarily out of the self-preservation instinct. 5s that operate primarily out of the self-preservation instinct are natural minimalists. They feel safe and secure by simply eradicating as many needs as possible. This can be a great trait in that it allows them to be very intentional about what they consume, but it often leaves them with nothing left over to share with others, specifically in regards to their own emotional and intellectual energy. The minute self-preservation 5s leave their home, their already limited gas tank begins to drain. Social interactions, especially with new people, are viewed with animosity because they drain the energy that the type 5 could be using to solve some problem or learn some skill. So they often resent having to interact with people unless it's in the context of their work life. This also makes self-preservation 5s the biggest loners of the Enneagram. They're like rechargeable batteries that prefer to just stay plugged into the wall at home rather than actually be put to use. So if you pressure a self-pres 5 to get outside of themselves, then get ready for their complete internal shutdown. Self-pres 5s can become so isolated that their mind begins to spiral, and they often fall into conspiracy theories, especially if they have a 6 wing, and their dark virtual communities become their only contact with the outside world. I say that to remind self-preservation 5s that it's imperative to find healthy relationships where they can come alive and feel safe sharing their thoughts and trust or respect others enough to have their intellectual status challenged in a healthy way that fosters humility and social interconnection. All right, that's the self-preservation instinct. Time to move on to 5s with a social instinct. Social 5s are the epitome of the specialist. They've learned to subvert their tendency to isolate by finding a job or role in society that lets them be the keeper of some secret or specialized knowledge. The Enneagram Institute says social 5s like to think of themselves as masters of wisdom. And I know a few social 5s that fit this description to a T, one of whom runs an executive life coaching business in which he holds the keys to your success. Because social 5s have more tangible interactions with their environment, they become more acutely aware of the ways in which they lack the knowledge or skills that many other people have. Typically, sports are a big source of shame for social 5s because it's one major area of life that they couldn't get better at by thinking about it. This keeps 5s in their element, and they like to stay in their sweet spot, so they rarely seek out social interactions that would expose their inexperience or awkwardness. Social 5s often slip into a general dissatisfaction with the basic human experience, and so they constantly critique society, which can make them look like type 1 reformers. If you've seen Westworld, I feel like Anthony Hopkins' character is a great example of the social 5 mixing his dissatisfaction with humanity and his genius level of innovation. Social 5s really need to spend some time finding an intellectual equal, usually a mentor or a counselor of some kind, that can help them foster a sense of empathy and patience for the human condition. But that's enough about the social instinct. Let's talk about the last one, which is the sexual instinct. Sexual 5s are a bit of a paradox because the sexual instinct drives them to subvert their primary operating system. 5s in general are detached and aloof, but the sexual instinct craves intimacy, intensity, and deep relational connection. Sexual 5s often create a confusing push-pull relationship with their loved ones because one moment they'll be sharing deep secrets and going on and on about their experiences or ideas, and then boom, they disappear for weeks at a time and they won't pick up your call. Sexual 5s are super skittish and they easily feel misunderstood. Sexual 5s look at sex as the one place they can be free from logic and the constant chatter of their mind. They love the idea of creating a private world with the perfect mate, but they typically don't trust people enough to get to that deep level of intimacy. And when sexual fives become really unhealthy, the sexual world just becomes another place to explore dark fetishes and disturbing fantasies. I say that because all fives, no matter what their primary instinct, are naturally drawn to dark or taboo subjects in society. They like to operate outside the normal mainstream lines of practical behaviors. This is why sexual fives need to be very careful about what they watch, because their eyes open the doors to their imagination, and then their imagination can lead them to some really dark habits. I feel like I may have just enticed some fives to go searching for dark shit because it's like reverse psychology when you tell someone not to look at something, but I mean, in all seriousness, like go towards the light, fives. All right, that's how each of the three instincts has a unique influence on the type 5 personality. Now let's talk about where type 5s fall in each of the three Enneagram triads, starting with the triad centers. The three groups within the triad centers are the head group, the heart group, and the gut group or the body group. Type 5s are firmly in the head group alongside type 6 loyalists and type 7 enthusiasts. All head types suffer from anxiety rooted mostly in their fear of the future. 5s internalize their anxiety in an attempt to figure out the issues that are plaguing them. However, when they become anxious about big, unanswerable questions, this desire to retreat into the mind actually fuels the anxiety that they're trying to escape. All right, next up is the harmonic triad. The harmonic triad is all about the way we cope with pain, loss, and trauma. The three groups of the harmonic triad are the positive outlook group, the reactive group, and the competency group. 5s are in the competency group alongside type 1 reformers and type 3 achievers. When trauma strikes the competency group, they tend to avoid feeling any pain by making it a purely logical situation. So if someone dies, it's like, okay, let's organize the funeral, let's settle the will, and let's move forward. And 5s in particular try to avoid feeling grief because it totally drains them of energy, and 5s are energy hoarders. Okay, last up is the Hornevian triad. The Hornevian triad describes the general ways Enneagram types behave in social situations, be it at a party or at the office. The three groups within the Hornevian triad are the assertive group, the compliant group, and the withdrawn group. I'm sure you guessed it. Type 5s are in the withdrawn group alongside type 9 peacemakers and type 4 individualists. 5s are natural introverts, so they see every social interaction as potentially sucking them dry of the energy they need to function. However, you may see 5s actually cut loose and come alive during things like a vacation because they know there's a start time and an end time to the trip. So they're much more free-spirited than when they're at some ambiguous social event filled with strangers and they don't know when they're going to be able to get out of there. Okay, that's where type 5s fall within each of the three Enneagram triads. If you want to learn more about those triads, I've got individual episodes on each of them linked below. So throughout this episode, I've described a number of potential issues that type 5s face in their journey through self-awareness and personal growth. So I want to end with some practical steps 5s can take to ensure they're living into their best qualities. The biggest thing 5s can do to help tap into their healthiest self is to cultivate empathy and compassion for other people. 5s tend to objectify people with cold rationality, so it's vital to use their insight to try and understand and relate to other people, even if they're far from being your intellectual equal. Remember that empathy, not information, will heal your anxiety and keep you connected and grounded in reality. Another more basic practice that helps 5s stay physically present is getting into activities like yoga or distance running, or even like dancing is actually a great way to get out of the mental spirals that 5s are prone to. Next up, 5s are like 9s in that they're professionals at wasting time. It's not to say that they're lazy at all. It's just that 5s have so much insecurity around their work that they often procrastinate hitting send and checking things off. 5s will grow in confidence if they practice releasing their ideas or creations into the world even when they feel incomplete or imperfect. 5s will also be more confident if they spend focused time on their craft rather than multitasking and splitting their intellectual gifts across a dozen different outlets. Lastly, in regards to relationships, 5s really need to practice letting people in and trusting them enough to have healthy conflict. 5s typically use their intellect to intimidate people, and so they don't handle it well when people push back. I understand that this is a tall order for type 5s who constantly feel pushed away by others, but y'all really have to learn that cooperation is more valuable than domination, and that just because you have conflict doesn't mean that the relationships aren't worth the energy you're putting into them. And it also doesn't mean that people are untrustworthy just because they push back on you. Fives also tend to be such stone cold thinkers that during conflicts, they use logic to avoid apologizing and feel superior because they're not the ones getting all emotional. So again, going back to my first point, cultivating empathy and humility will be crucial for fives to maintain healthy relationships, and healthy relationships keep fives thinking clearly, which is what you really want. All right, that's all I got for you. I know these episodes are a lot, so it's time to downshift a bit and have some fun with the Type 5 personality with these final, silly topics that really have nothing to do with the true work of the Enneagram, but hey, they're fun to talk about. When it comes to a country that represents the Type 5 personality best, Great Britain is your winner. Think about their intellectual skepticism and somewhat gloomy yet endearing demeanor. Next up, the Type 5 spirit animals are the owl and the fox, both symbols of wisdom mixed with a bit of mischievousness. And when it comes to some famous Type 5s you may know, the Enneagram Institute lists Alfred Hitchcock, Stanley Kubrick, Tim Burton, Edgar Allan Poe, and Stephen King. So basically the source of all of my childhood nightmares. Appreciate that, Type 5s. But 5s also have almost every famous inventor ever, like Einstein, Edison, and probably Elon as well. Oh, and in the Marvel universe, I'd say without a doubt, it's Doctor Strange. Okay, friends, that's a wrap on this personality type overview for the Type 5 investigator. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't overwhelmingly critical for you. And if you are a Type 5, I hope I left you with some helpful perspective on who you are and how to continually grow into your best self. And if you liked this episode, it would mean a whole lot to me if you would hit that like button, share it with your friends, or subscribe to the channel. And if you feel so inclined, drop me a comment about anything you'd like to learn more about, or anything that really stood out to you in this episode. I do my best to respond to everything y'all send my way, and I really do love hearing your perspective on these videos. Also, if you want to work together in a more professional setting, just go to you'vegotatype.com, fill out a contact card, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. As always, I'm your host, Colton Simmons, and I'll see you next time on You've Got a Type.